Okay, so now we have finished setting up our message channel. We have everything authorized and we are actually talking to Ultra and getting all the events that we're interested in. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and implement our panel opening. And so there's a few things we need to do. Remember that when we change the JavaScript, we also have to clear our cache, and so I've already done that, but make sure you do that before you take care of that. And so here's what we need to do. We'll go ahead and sign in as administrator, which means I'm going to have to clear my cache again, but that's okay. And so here under sessions, which will be courses and a normal learn instance, I'm going to head over to my Ultra Extension Framework course. And so we are going to go ahead and create a content item that we want to open our panel when somebody clicks on it. So let's go ahead and click this plus, and we will create a document, and we will call this Launch Our Panel, and make it available, and go ahead and add content that just says, look at this beautiful panel. So I'll go ahead and save this, and keep in mind we're going to need this content ID, so 1256. So I'm going to leave it on this page for just a moment, and let's head over to our IDE, and let's go ahead and check out the latest code. And so let's say git checkout 3 UEF panel. So we've checked out our panel, we've created the local branch, and we're pointing to the remote branch. And so you can see some things have changed already. So we are in our app.py, and you can see where we left off last time was here where we were rendering the index.html. So we're adding a couple of things. Before we were sending the learn URL, we were sending the token. Now we're sending a panel URL. And so this tells our JavaScript what endpoint to launch when we receive the message we're expecting from within Blackboard. The other thing we see is now we have a course ID, and this 47_1, this is the course PK1 for the UEF course that I'm using for the demonstration. This would obviously need to be changed for your integration, and then we have the content ID. So let me go back to here, and let me copy this content ID, and we will paste it here. And so now this is all set to look for a route which passes me the data that says this route has gone into this course and the user has clicked on this content ID. And so that is all the changes that we're making to make this work, except for we are adding our hello world endpoint. So up here we're setting it to app URL, which is our ngrok URL, and we're saying load that URL with the hello world endpoint, and when that loads we are saying hello, and we are rendering the template hello world. So if you remember when we first started with the LTI tool, hello world.html is what we were loading instead of the index.html. So basically what's going to happen when we run this code, we are going to be displaying the same thing we displayed when we first started, only instead of being in an LTI tool, we will be in an Ultra Extension Framework integration. And one thing that I do want to point out, this login required, I am using Flask login to secure endpoints that would otherwise be available to anyone. So if you were to guess the app URL and hello world, you would be able to load this. But what we're doing up here in the LTI workflow is when we do the launch and then we get the auth code, we're actually right here using Flask login to log in the user based on their UUID from Learn. And so this login required in the background is running code that takes the user's UUID, checks to see if the user's UUID is listed as login, and if it is, then it renders this hello world. If it's not, then it takes them to a message that says this is only meant to be a valid LTI launch. So you see we're passing some new stuff to index.html. So let's look under templates and we'll go to index.html, and you can see that's the same pattern. We were setting these variables, learn URL and token. Now we're also setting the panel URL, the course ID, and the content ID. And then we're loading our tutorial-integration.javascript. And so the last thing we need to look at is our tutorial integration.javascript. And let's take a look and see what's new in here. So at the beginning, obviously everything looks the same as it did before. But what's different is now we have some new things that we're looking for on the Ultra messages. So we get on message from Ultra message, and here's where we were checking for our authorization string, but now we're checking to see if the message data type is event. If it's event, then it is one of the events that we've asked to listen for, and particularly the one that we're listening for is the route event. So if we get an event and it is the event type of route, then we're looking for these two route names: base admin peak, course outline peak, content manage edit document, and base courses. And so this allows our route to be to match whether or not you go through the course listing to get to the course, or whether you go through the admin panel to get to the course. If you only want it to be done through one way or the other, you can certainly use one of these or the other. I wanted to use both just in case I accidentally pull up the course in the course list on the admin panel instead of in the course list in Ultra. So if that route matches, that means I'm looking at the course outline for a course, but it doesn't tell me what course it is. So the next thing I'm doing is, if that is true, then I want to see, based on the route data, if the course ID that is active in Ultra is the course ID that I was looking for. And then I'm looking to see if the route data ID is the content ID that I was looking for. If both of these are true, then it runs my code. If one of these is not true or neither of these is true, then it continues on processing. So in this case, we're looking at what happens when both of these things match. And so what we are doing is we are setting up the basics that we need for our panel. And so we're setting a timeout of 2,000 milliseconds, and then we're saying send this post message to Ultra. And the type of message that I'm sending is a portal panel. That means I'm asking them to open a panel. I'm giving the panel an ID of panel-1, and that will be important later as I try to interact with this panel. I'm requesting the panel type small. You'll be surprised to know that if you want a large panel, it would be panel type full, because apparently full and small are opposites. But hey, I didn't write it, so. And then we're giving the panel title Hello World, and so this will actually show up as the title of the panel, so you don't have to do that work yourself. And then I'm just saying if somebody closes the panel, then we get panel-1-close. And if somebody clicks on the X, then we get panel-1.close. And so this gets sent off to Ultra. And basically what we're doing is we're saying, hey, Ultra, you did something I'm interested in. Can you open a panel for me, please? And so in response to opening the panel, Ultra says, yep, it's open for you. And so now we know that we have the portal panel response. And so we want to render something into that panel. So render panel contents, we're doing a number of things. First, we're checking the correlation ID to make sure it's the panel that we actually asked for. Because if you open a panel in Ultra, you do get notifications that that panel is open. And so in this case, we'll assume that it is the one that we wanted. Then we will save the panel ID based on the panel ID that is sent to us from Ultra. And this is a long hexadecimal key, but it uniquely identifies that specific panel so that we can interact with it. And so now what we're saying is, okay, thanks for opening that panel. Thanks for putting an iframe in it. I would like you to put this stuff in that iframe. And so what you see here, we're sending a message called portal render. We are setting the portal ID to the portal ID that they just sent us so that they know which panel to put this in. And then we're setting the content. So this is the formatting information for the contents that we'd like to send. And then we're saying this is the iframe to open, this is what we want the properties for the iframe to be, and then here's our source. This is what we want you to put in the iframe. And if you recall, we set this equal to our hello world endpoint. So the end result to this will be a panel with an iframe, and within that iframe will be the results of rendering that URL. And so that's the changes, right? So let's see what's going to happen when we run this. So of course we're using Docker, and so we're going to do our Docker build -t UEF tutorial, and this one would be version 5. And just a note, you don't have to change the version. You don't even have to specify a version. But I'm doing this so that I can keep all of the various steps running and see them in Docker Desktop. But you can certainly kill an image and then reuse that same image name. So we're building our image. It's pretty quick because all of the large operations are cached, and so that layer that we are changing is fairly far along in the Docker build process, and so it goes by pretty quickly because most of it's already cached. And so let's go ahead and run it. Say docker run -port 5000, and we want to forward that container port to 5000 on our host. We're going to give it a name that we can easily recognize, so UEF tutorial 4. And then we are going to tell it we want to create that container with that data based on this image. All right, we are running. So let's check ngrok. Let's make sure that our container is running successfully, and it is. So we'll go ahead and close that. And let's go ahead back to Blackboard Learn. And we are going to sign out, and we are going to clear our cache. And once that is done, we'll go ahead and close this window. It's clearing slowly, of course. So we'll close this window, and we will come back over here to our Learn instance and click sign in. Because we cleared the cache, that means the cookie's gone away that says that we've already accepted the cookie terms of use. So we have to do that again. So we'll click OK, and now I'm going to clear the console, and let's go ahead and sign in. All right, so signing in, everything is loading. As I mentioned, this is a noisy system, so you're seeing a bunch of stuff that's already going. And so now you can see a number of things. So you can see that we have our route. You can see that we've got a portal new telling us that that this panel is open. And we can look at that and see that there's some helpful information in there, like the portal ID that we had looked at before, like the type event, the event type that we're looking for, portal new. But let's see what happens when we get to our course. So we'll go ahead and click Sessions, and we'll go ahead to our UEF course. Now when I click on Launch Our Panel, we should see a panel. So we'll click it, and Launch Our Panel is open, and here is our Hello World. So formatting is a little wonky based on the way that I set this up apparently. But as you can see, our portal opened when we wanted it to, and it rendered the content that we wanted it to render. And so if we just take a second and look at what actually happened, we can see that here we received a route event for base courses peak course outline. And so if we look at this, we can see the route data that this was when we first entered the course. So here's the course ID, but notice there is no ID, which corresponds to the content ID. So of course nothing happened when we entered the course. Now let's find our route event. There's an LTI launch link. Here we go. So here is our route. So let's take a look at this route event. And so we'll look at our route data. And so you can see all the things that we were looking for. We were looking for the route name to equal base courses peak course outline peak content manage edit document, which it matches. So the next thing that we checked was to see if the course ID was 47 and the content ID was 1256, and it is. And so we said, hey, we like that. Give us a panel. And so here you can see we are requesting our panel with the panel title Hello World, with all the attributes that we set. And then Ultra is saying back to us, yes, portal new, which means the portal is open, and here's the portal response. So if we look at the portal response, we can see that the portal ID matches, we can see the correlation ID matches, you can see that the status was successful. And so then we ask them to render our content. And so here you can see the content render. You can see under contents all the stuff that we asked them to provide, including the iframe information, and under iframe, and then we have the span tag, and we have the portal ID and the portal type. And then here is our response, and you can see it was successful, and we know it was successful because now we see our panel. So that is essentially a working Ultra extension framework integration. We did a little bit of work, but considering we took an existing LTI tool and turned it into an Ultra extension framework in integration in just about 30 minutes, you can see it's pretty powerful and it's not super difficult to use. There is some learning curve involved when you're setting up your integration JavaScript. But the good thing is once you have that set up, all the basics are the same regardless of what your integration actually does. And so once you have this working and you have the JavaScript, even if you have an LTI tool that's written in Node or in Java, the integration JavaScript is still loaded and that code is the same and can be used from project to project. So very cool. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this recording. We have one more step that we're going to take, and that is integrating local storage so that we can further the communication from what it is currently, which is just the Ultra extension or the Ultra UI talking to our integration JavaScript. And we're going to allow that conversation to continue to the rest of our application, and we'll show you a very easy example of how this works and something that you can use as you go forward.